Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Strange Machine Games, and I'm going to do a requested video for SuperAge. We're going to run through a little tutorial, talking about how it works, and the different type of actions you can do in the combat, and just how it plays in general. And I am using the lower DPI digital PDF, so it might come out a little grainy on video, but it's the one with the bookmarks. So I want to talk about SuperAge and how it works a little bit. There's a character creation video, and we don't want to go through absolutely everything and about the game, but just basically how the mechanics work. So we're going to go and we're going to talk about the heroes and what these stats mean and everything here. So zoom in here. And we're going to look at Neptunus. Let's see. All right. So the important things really want to focus on are our three basic heroic traits: force, resilience, and knowledge. The character sheet tells us what movement rates are and what distance rates are for attacking and stuff like that. But basically, force is how you inflict damage, resilience is how you absorb damage, and knowledge is how you do counter moves. And basically, when you want to take an action, for example, there are specifically 5 actions to take. And the GM will set a time frame for these actions. And this also follows through for Robotech, so if you want to learn to play Robotech, this will help a little bit. Basically, there are, let me find the challenges here. Okay. So here are our basic actions. Okay. Overpowering, which basically means you're trying to inflict damage. Okay. This is found on page 92. Defending allows you to soak damage, right? Now this is an additional soak over what your resilience already does. We'll get into that. Counter lets you come up with an alternate solution. So it literally says alternate solution here, but really it's a way to come up with a cinematic first, and we'll explain what that means. Interact means you're interacting with the world, jumping to grab a fallen child or hacking a terminal. And assisting means you're going to help somebody else. Okay? So go back to Neptunus. We'll see here that he has a force of 2. Okay? And that means that he is, out of 6 points for a hero, 0 being a regular human, 1 is being someone who is very well trained, but still sort of like the top of what a human can do. 2 is superhuman, right? It's just above what humans can do, something special. So he has this as a force. Now we look at what his archetype is, and we mitigate, or we sort of determine exactly how this force is used based on his archetype. So he's an alien shapeshifter. So because he's a shapeshifter, maybe he uses this force in a lot of ways, right? He could punch someone really hard. He could also maybe turn into something that has like a very, very fine point and hit something very deep, like a very penetrating strike. He also has these like dissipate and phase. So depending on exactly how you want this character to work, and this is something that you talk with the GM and the other players about, but you would say, hey, you know, my guy he can phase and he can shapeshift, so his force looks like this, right? And in this case, his force is based on particle energy and pinpoint, and he also has a mental blast. Okay? Particle energy, it's like him shooting a particle beam out of his eyes or his fist. He does have ranged and melee attacks, so he can do both. Pinpoint means he hits the spot he wants to hit. And we also have these other modifiers, specific and general, for these two. And I'll explain what those mean a little bit later. And to some degree, you can kind of not ignore them, but they're not quite as important. But they do factor in with building a character. So let's say he's shooting something that is dark, right? Something that absorbs all kinds of light and energy. like shooting, we'll call him Shadow Man, right? So Neptunus is attacking Shadow Man. If Neptunus is attacking Shadow Man, the GM could say, well, your particle energy gets absorbed and it doesn't do any damage. So the GM could take this 2 and say, you can't use this, Neptunus. You don't get to use this part of your attack. However, pinpoint may still work. Now, the GM could also say, well, particle energy takes a major penalty, which means you still might get a point out of it, because you can shoot other things, right? You can shoot like a beam and have the beam fall on Shadow Man, or you can shoot the floor and have Shadow Man trip and get hurt. Those types of things. So based on the situation and what's happening, these values can be mitigated. Now, these basic heroic traits are only mitigated when the vulnerability comes into play. So if he tries to shoot something that is gold, he doesn't have a force 2 anymore, right? His force is probably going to be negated either to a 1 or to a 0, in which case he's acting like a regular person. And this could be that if he gets stabbed with gold, he loses his power, or it just doesn't affect it. Now, once again, he can shoot things in the environment, right? And this is all part of calling out your action, what you're doing for the turn. But in your turn, you get to use all of these abilities. If someone is shooting you, he has an alien body, and he has agility. He also has this mental shield, right? This burst ability, where he can add a couple dice one time and until it sort of recharges. But let's just sort of ignore the burst for now. So he can have a total of, and each of these points equates to a dice. So he has, for his resilience, he has a base resilience of 2, and he can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to most of his defense actions. Okay. Now, the resilience, well, actually, any of these, you once again, you get to use these points when they're not being negated or come into play. So let's say someone is shooting him with elemental gold bullets. He still might get his agility, but he's not going to get any of his innate resilience, and he's not going to get his alien body to defend against that. Okay, so this means that depending on the situation, he could lose his resilience and have that go down to a 0 or a 1. It means he's more likely to take damage when he does get hit. We'll explain that on the Mech Chart, which is the maximum effect chart. But let's just say someone has some sort of like weird alien attack gun, like it disrupts his molecules. Okay, he still might get his resilience because it's not elemental gold, but he doesn't get his alien body. So in this case, the total dice he would have to defend would be 1, 2, and 3. Now, the S, B, S, G, and U, that stands for burst, specific, general, and universal. That's how strong these are. And they come with different costs. Burst is the cheapest. You just get to use it once. You throw in the extra dice, and then it needs to recharge. It can recharge in a second, or it can recharge in weeks. It just is up to how that works. If you're firing missiles, you probably need to reload the missiles. So you need to go back to base or go to like a mobile refitting station. Mental blast means he might need to have a mental charge. Someone else could give him that mental charge, right? Another character could spend an action to do that, and then he would get this back. Or just may take some time of focus. He might need to meditate to get this back. So burst is just, it's quick, it's usable, it goes away real fast, and then it recharges. Specific is the next level. Specific, it means that it is easily taken away. So for example, if you are a hero with a really powerful gun, right? If you lose that gun, you're not powerful anymore. Right? Now, if you're a hero that has an infinite supply of guns and knives strapped to your body, then if you lose a gun, that's no big deal. You pull another one out. So the difference in that would be S to G, right? If you have one gun versus lots of guns, is your ability easily turned off? Like particle energy is much easier turned off. He doesn't have a backup. He doesn't have like a backup to his particle energy. So that means it's easier to short out and lose. Now, his pinpoint is general. It means that no matter what he has or what he's doing, he's always good at putting things on, the spot where he wants them to be. Hence this moniker here. Now, universal, the U, which isn't on this character, means that the ability never goes away unless it's attributed to a vulnerability. So, for example, let's say his alien body was a U. That means his alien body is so tough, there is nothing you can make or do or find that can take that alien body ability away. except for running into his vulnerability, in this case, the elemental gold. Okay? Knowledge is what the character knows, and basically all of their mental and charismatic abilities. So guile, in this case, he has academics, which is general knowledge, and psychology. Other examples are street smarts, I said guile or deception or grifting. Any of those work really well. But it could be, you could have just some basic high school knowledge, or it could even be local knowledge. It could be investigation, any kind of mental process that the character has, anything the character can come up with their brain or their mouth. Okay? And once again, if generally this is going to be more interaction with the world, but for example, if you can use psychology and academics, and in this case, psychology is specific and academics is general. So he has a general knowledge of academics, which means he kind of knows a good amount of things. If his academics was specific, he might just sort of not know as much. He would have less of a knowledge base in general. So he also has some psychology. So this would be like, I'm trying to figure out if he's trying to reach into the mind of an opponent, he would get his 2 dice plus 1 for psychology. Academics doesn't apply. However, if he's looking or doing some research into maybe like, I don't know, some sort of like epidemiology or mental health in general, he might both throw his academics in depending on the situation. Okay. And that's how these work. You always get to roll everything. So in this case, if he wants to use his burst, he would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dice to roll. That's 7 dice 6. Same thing with the resilience. It's built the same way. Knowledge will be a total of 5. But a lot of times these get mitigated, right? You generally want to use all of your abilities. Now the good news is you can spread these out into a bunch of 1s at character creation, or you can put them all into the same kind of thing. Like you instead of having 3 here as particle energy and pinpoint, you could have them all 3 in particle energy. But that just means that if you lose it, you're a lot weaker. So having too many is sort of like putting all your eggs into one basket. Okay? All right. Oh, he's also powered through his alien abilities, right? And that would mean that all of these are sort of alien, right? That's how he gets his force. So if something were to inhibit his alien ability, essentially the elemental gold, but if he's in a place where maybe his alien abilities don't work, then he might not be able to use them, or if someone can cancel out his alien abilities. But this is more powered, is more really for trying to determine the expectation between the GM and the player. Like, well, how is my alien shapeshifter getting powered through his alien abilities? Yeah. So let's go back and look at the actions again. Okay. So force is always tied to overpower. Anytime you overpower, you're going to use a force. Unless there's some weird thing that happens, and there might be some special rules that let you get around that. Resilience is the same thing. Anytime you want to defend, you use resilience. Knowledge, anytime you want to counter, you use knowledge. And then there's assist. You can assist through any of these, depending on what the action is. And interact. Now, interact is generally going to be knowledge, but it can also be the other two, just depending on the situation. So let's go through and look at our... All right, we're going to look through the Mech chart now. The Mech stands for maximum effects chart, and that's literally what it means, maximum effect that you can cause. Now this really relates to wounds, how many wounds you have. Now, you'll notice most characters, their wounds are going to be based on their resilience values. So in this case, we have a resilience of 2. So Neptunus is going to have 3 brawl wounds, right? So it's basically your resilience plus 1, and then divide that in half and get that many as critical. So he has 3 brawl wounds and 1 critical. It's not really a lot of wounds for a heavy-duty brawler, but for a universal, like a general character that has a lot of different skills, or a face-type character, that's going to be kind of standard for it. So when we talk about the Mech chart, you're always going to be looking at the base resilience of the character when you take damage. Okay. So there you go. if your force is 3 and you're attacking somebody with resilience of 3 in one action, you can only ever do 1 point of damage. Okay? If my force or knowledge base is 4 and I'm coming up against resilience 3, the most I can do is 1 damage. Now, if I go up by 2 levels and my force or knowledge is 5 and I'm attacking somebody with a resilience of 3, my ability is to be able to cause 2 wounds. Now, this is not 2 wounds per success. This is a total of 2 wounds, assuming you have 2 successes. That's what the X means. Vice versa, if somebody with, if you're going the opposite direction, if you drop it back the other way, if we're looking at a force or knowledge of 2 against a 4, resilience of 4, you need 2 successes to do 1 wound. Okay? And that's the max you can really do, 1 wound. Now, you get to these hard numbers here. Basically, if somebody with S level of strength, which is, I don't know, a god, attacks a human, you just can kill him with 1 success. Same thing here, an S level with 1 success can incapacitate the victim or the target. With 2 successes, probably just kill him, depending on how the GM sees that working. Now, if a S level character strikes and does 1 wound, or has 1 success against a resilience 2 character, it will inflict 3 damage per success. So 3 successes would be a total of 9 damage, and there isn't really much that can take that. But the S's are generally a special circumstance. So the worst circumstance, a level 6 against a 0 can cause 4 wounds with 4 successes. Now generally zeros don't have any wounds, they have 1 wound, and so that's overkill by a lot. Now when you overkill, when you're trying to overpower, right? It's one of the options. It's basically to attack. So we go back to the five options for your actions. Each action you choose to take one of these actions per turn. You can always move within that action at your speed during the turn. So overpowering is using your force to try to inflict damage. Okay? Resilience is using, defend is using your resilience to try to mitigate damage. Okay? Now your resilience it also provides you your base level wounds, and it automatically already acts as like a soak mechanism through this mech chart here. So counter does the same thing, right? It's basically your mental ability to kind of trick somebody. The difference is that counter causes a cinematic effect first, and then overkill successes will cause wounds based on this chart. Now, I haven't talked about overkill yet, but we're going to talk about that right now. Okay? And the next thing we're going to go to is we're going to do a little sample, of success, like a little combat. All right, so before we go into do our little little combat demo, I just wanted to review with you the actions and the general flow of how a conflict occurs. So once again, we have our actions: overpower, defend, counter, assist, interact. And overpower is almost always associated with force. As a rule, it's associated with force, but there's a few things that can break that. Defend with resilience and counter with knowledge. Now the flow is, for every round, the GM tells you what's going on, right? And you then choose your action. All the players choose their actions and tell the GM what they're doing. Okay, put this in here. Tell GM, okay? Then everyone rolls, okay? Now, the reason is there's no true initiative in SuperAge, right? There's no initiative. So because there's no initiative, the GM has to kind of determine how things operate, in what order they operate. Characters who are speedy, have more speed, or have or speedster-like aspects will generally go first. Someone with a ranged attack, like a gun, may go before someone with a bow with a ranged attack. Someone with a bow may go before someone who has like a sword. However, someone with a whip, and the whip's long enough, may be able to go before the bow, or maybe they go at the same time. So the GM just sort of kind of works out what happens. In most cases, overpowered's defends and counters are just all rolled opposed to each other all the time. Okay. Once everyone rolls, the GM then describes the successes, and you check the mech chart, which we just talked about, to see how much damage you can do. So we'll get into this, but let's say, okay, so just decide Cinemac move. We want to say before that, check overkill. Okay. Now many powers require you to use overkill, or they require you to use additional successes. So for example, if I have a power to take over your mind, I can't do that with one success. If you roll 5 successes and I roll 6, it doesn't happen. I need to roll at least 7 successes. So I need at least overkill of 2 for that to occur. So overkill is anything more than you need. Overkill also determines the strength of the cinematic move. Right? And the cinematic move generally go in this fashion. So if you have +1 success, that's considered an edge. Move this box down here. +2 successes is an advantage. Okay, there's no +3, there's a +4. That's a major advantage. And then +6 successes is a triumph. There we go. So this is the level of cinematic move that you get to describe and take against your opponent, or your opponent gets to take against you, depending on what the rules happen. All right, and this is all done with overkill after you do the mech. So for example, if I roll 5 successes and my opponent rolls 2 successes, and we have the same level of strength and resilience. On the mech chart, I'm going to check, and I'm going to see that, bring it up here. I'm going to see that a 3 versus a 3 is 1. Okay, so let's check this out. So I'm going to have E equals 5, target equals 2. Okay, that means that there is, this results in 3 successes. Okay, so 1 success equals, let's put an S here, equals 1 damage. So boom, your target takes the damage. But then that means 2 successes also equal an advantage. And you can take that advantage, against the opponent through an agreed move that between you and the GM. So a lot of times 1 success might be you can change his positioning, you knock him into something, right? 2 successes means you might knock him into something that really hurts him. So for example, an electric man gets knocked into a fire hydrant and water shorts him out, right? That might be a 1-round effect. Or you could short out one of his abilities for longer. Maybe he has a power he's been using, or a ranged attack. You could say that, well, now he can't shoot his attack at range for a round or 2. It just kind of is based on the fictional positioning, whenever the GM really, agrees with. Now this is pretty standard for what we would call an overpower. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this into, make this an overpower. Probably could just struggling here. Okay, so that's a typical overpower. Okay, yeah. And that's if two targets are going against each other. If these were flipped, this would happen to me. Now it's very similar with defense. The only difference is with a defense you get half the number of successes. of overkill successes. So in the same scenario, now I'm defending, right? I have 5, he has 2. That means I have 3 successes. So this means that I defeat him in the combat. He doesn't damage me. I soak all the damage. And now, in this case, I would have 3 successes. So that would still equal an advantage. Okay. And now if I had 4 successes, if this was a 6, then this would get bumped up to a major advantage. In this case, it's a 5. So I don't have that luxury. But let's say this was flipped. Let's say I get 1 success and he gets, I don't know, 6 successes. It's a big difference. That means results in 5 difference there. Okay. Immediately you look at the chart, and once again his attack goes against my resilience, as just like you're always taking damage against your resilience, even though you get to roll your that was Warframe. I play Warframe. Even though you get to roll your force against the force, it's force versus force in an overpower, you still look at resilience. So the winner looks at their force against the resilience. Okay, in this case, it's the same thing, but the 5 successes, I would still take 1 damage, because 1 success is used for a damage. Okay, and that means that there are still 4 successes left over, which would equate to a major advantage, but because I'm defending, this gets halved. So 4 divided by 2 equals 2, which is still an advantage, but it's better than a major advantage. I'm not going to have something get knocked out. I'm still only taking that 1 damage. Now, the other nice thing about defending is you can defend other people. And when you there are declaration rules, so when the GM says, hey, what's everyone doing? You're saying, I'm overpowering Goldman. Okay? The defending person just has to say, I'm defending. And the defender can, once the defender hears how the combat's being played out, the defender can choose how they use their defensive action. Do they want to defend Goldman's attack against innocent civilians? Do they want to have Goldman's attacks be defended against another hero? You can choose. And because it halves the advantage, anytime you halves overkill successes, anytime you defend another target, the overkill successes would go into that other target. So for example, if I'm defending, let's say, Neptunus, and he's attacking somebody else and someone's attacking him, I can get between the attack, I can soak that damage with my defensive successes, and for example in this case, if something gets by 2 successes, that could still hurt Neptunus, but the cinematic taking against him won't really be of consequence. It'll be it would be halved to 1, which would be a 0, right? So that wouldn't be a problem at all. The last action we have to talk about, and this one works a little different, is knowledge. Okay. Okay. So knowledge works by having the player tell the GM the effect that they want to have. They basically say, I want to knock, I'm Smart Man and I'm being rampaged against Fury Man, but I'm going to trick Fury Man into falling into this pit of acid. Okay, so basically you do the same thing. You take your knowledge, you go against the target. You go against the target's roll. So if the target's trying to overpower you or trying to defend you, whatever they're using is basically successes versus successes. In this case, if I roll 5, the target rolls 2, that's 3 successes. But instead of doing damage first, I immediately take we flip the book and we do cinematics first. So I have 3 successes, and what I wanted to do equated to an advantage. So I can use 2 of my successes to get an advantage. Okay, and now that I've had 2 successes for an advantage, I can use 1 success to plunk in to try to damage them. All right, once again, we go to the mech and we say, hey, you know, if my knowledge is 5, or I get a look, you roll if my knowledge is 2, and I'm going against something with a resilience of 5 or 6, I don't have enough to damage it. But if my knowledge is high and I'm going against somebody with a resilience that's low, I then will be able to inflict some damage. But the main thing is that you're trying to get a reposition, you're trying to hinder in some way before. Okay, now those are your standard actions and how they work. The last thing is assisting and interacting. So interacting is made against the world. The GM will have a check and say, okay, you need 3 successes and you got 5 successes. Okay, so let's say interact. Okay, so you're gonna have a target. The target might equal 4 successes. All right, you get 6 successes, and this equates to 2 successes. Okay, and you would then succeed. Now, because you at least have 1 success, you would also get an edge on this as well. So if something happens, okay, so it's 2 success, so 1 success equals accomplished, and then you get 1 success for an edge, cinematic. Okay, so this means that you get some level of benefit over this. If you're trying to catch somebody, not only do you catch them, but you can put them in like maybe a safe spot, or not only do you rescue the child, you rescue the cat too. Or maybe as you rescued the person, victim, a journalist gets an extremely dramatic shot that helps you, you know, your some sort of political agenda you have in the future, or, you know, gets supers more famous or something, whatever you want. Assist is a little different in that basically you're going to give your successes to someone else, but they get halved. So, for example, me, I get 4 successes to help somebody attack, but because they get halved, they end up with 2 successes. So Buddy gets, you know, 3 successes plus my 2 successes, and that's going to equate to 5. Okay, so this 2 just adds into theirs. Any number of people can help assist. It's just basically how it works. And then once again, everything else is taken. All this, you go through this process and just see, you check the mech. Now here's the downfall of assisting. It always goes off the buddy's attribute, right? His heroic trait. So with his force, his resilience. If their force or resilience is a 4 and yours is a 4 and you assist them, it does not go to an 8, it does not go to a 5, it stays a 4. Okay? But what it does is it adds in successes. It also, basically, you don't really have to worry about mitigating your role, because it's already pre-mitigated. The GM could decide to take some away from you. But for example, if you have Blobman, Blobman's a bad guy, and you have Swordman and Flameman, and they're the good guys. So Swordman tries to chop Blobman, but every time he chops him, Blobman just heals up. Swordman is not getting very far. Burnman, however, Blobman seems to be vulnerable to Fireman's fire. He doesn't, when he gets burned, he doesn't regenerate his blobness. So the best thing for Swordman to do is to assist his buddy, to trip up the guy, right? And this is all abstracted through successes. You roll the successes and you make something up, but you still have to sort of describe to the GM what's happening, so the fictional positioning is realized. So Swordman trips up Blobman, he loses his balance. It just goes into successes as sort of like an abstract. It's added into the fictional positioning, and then fireman has more successes to burn. Now, there is a rule that with a major advantage, you can actually increase your damage by +1, as opposed to taking something else. You just hurt them really badly. So that's something that can occur with a lot of overkill successes. Yeah. And that's the basics of how SuperAge works. Right. Once again, no initiative. Choose your action. Tell the GM. Everyone then rolls. You can just roll at the same time, and then the GM just says, "Okay, this is what's going on. That's what's going on." Okay, so I've set up this little demonstration here on Roll20 for some basic combat. We're just do blue guys as good guys, red guys as bad guys. Nothing too fancy or special. In this case, we have a 4-on-4 type of combat. So this guy wants to overpower this guy. This guy wants to overpower this guy. This guy wants to overpower this guy. This guy wants to do it at range, right? So these guys are just attacking each other, right? Just in a linear manner. Maybe they're pairing off, as we see superheroes do so much in comics. So in this case, everyone can just roll. Everyone's just overpowering. It doesn't really matter who goes first. If this guy goes before this guy, right? I'm sorry. If this guy is faster than this guy, it doesn't really matter because each of these sort of combats is their own little thing going on. In which case, that as long as this combat can't affect this combat, initiative doesn't really matter. You just roll, and then you look at your opposed rolls, and you work out your damage, and set out your cinematic moves. Okay. The only time it matters is, for example, if these two are down here, and these two are up here. If this guy gets to go, so in a standard overpower situation, if we just look at these two guys here. If this guy is faster than this guy, they still both roll. The only time matters is if this guy gets the drop. Now, getting the drop means you do your damage first, and if your damage is enough to knock somebody out, then they don't do their damage. However, if it's not, then they get to do their damage back. So, for example, let's say this guy's got 2 wounds left, and this guy attacks. And he's much faster. He's a speedster, and he attacks this like slow blobby guy. But slow blobby guy still has some tricks up his sleeve. He spews, I don't know, acid or something. He's still got a pipe, right? He knocks boxes over, crates, or creates electrical short that zaps out into the room, right? So a lot of ways to damage a speedster. The speedster gets to go first, fine. But unless he does 2 damage, it doesn't matter, right? The blob guy gets to still fight back. Right, and then you just compare successes back and forth. In this case, you would still compare successes, unless it's a surprise attack. If he knows the attack is coming and this guy's faster, it doesn't really matter. If it's a sneak attack, he's like going to come from behind or jump out of the shadows. Then you get the getting the drop is sort of like a sneak attack. Okay. Now, in this case, if we have these guys here, and we have a ranged attack and a melee attack. You could say the ranged attack happens first, right? The other thing that could happen is you have 2-on-1. So for example, these 2 guys are attacking this guy, move this over here, and these 2 guys are attacking this one here, okay? So in this case, the rolls that matter are going to be these 2 guys here. So if this guy rolls, let's say he rolls 5 successes, and these guys both roll 3, they don't hurt him because he rolled more than both of them. Okay, it's not additive; it's individual. Okay, this is why assisting is always really important. Now, assisting means you may do less damage, but you have a better chance of hitting. Right? Same thing. Now, if this guy rolls a 2, and this guy rolls a 1, and this guy rolls a 4, the 4 beats the 2, the 1 doesn't. So only this guy would get to damage this guy. Okay? Trying to think of another scenario. So in that that means that if you have one really strong person fighting a bunch of weaker people, the one role could defend him against all of these guys. So we're just sort of abstracting the ability for one to fight many, but usually, you know, the many will overcome, and they can start assisting to overcome that if you're in bad luck rolling or something else. But generally speaking, initiative happens pretty free, in a pretty free-form manner, and certain things can happen. Like, for example, in the combat example, which I highly suggest everyone reading to really understand for the game. If someone's got their finger on a button, it's really going to be hard to stop that guy from pushing the button, right? The GM probably is going to give that guy initiative, the highest initiative, right? If he just wants to push a button, that's his thing. You can push a button. Now, maybe if you have a gun drawn on him or some sort of ranged attack ready to go, already aimed, maybe if you both roll Simo and you have enough successes from overkill to get a good cinematic move, you could maybe knock him away from the button before, or maybe you can destroy the machinery as the button's being pushed or something, so that the effect doesn't take place. But yeah, that basically describes how SuperAge works in a nutshell. There are some more advanced things, but once you get the context, you should be able to get that from the rulebook. So I know this was a really quick, messy video, but people asked for it. I wanted to get out quick, and hopefully it helps describe how the game works and runs. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at jeff@strangemachinegames.com, or come into our Discord, which you can find on our website, www.strangemachinegames.com. Under social media, we'll get you right to our Discord, and you can ask any kind of questions in Discord. We'll see it, and then we'll respond. And that's probably the best way, because I always get notifications on those immediately. But yeah, any other questions, feel free to post them in the YouTube channel as well. I'll try to get to them. Sometimes I don't see them though. So, but yeah, I hope the video helped you, and you have a great time playing SuperAge.